7:30 ABC, Auburn at Penn State.
Yeah.
This is a fun non-conference matchup. Penn State's favored by 6. Originally, I think they were favored by 7.5. 7.5.
Wow.
That line came down. People were hammering Auburn. And look, Auburn, for their part, has looked really good. They've outscored their opponents 122-10. It is at least worth mentioning that their opponents have been Akron and Alabama State.
Yeah.
That should not invalidate the results, but you could argue that's the easiest 2 games that any team in FBS has played to start their season in 21. But Auburn did what it was supposed to do. Kudos to them.
Correct.
Kudos to Bryan Harsin. Penn State also 2-0. They've taken a much different path, different road. Week 1, knocked off Wisconsin and Camp Randall. Week 2, back home, disposed rather easily of the defending MAC champion Ball State Cardinals.
Mm-hmm.
We don't really know much about either of these teams, Dan, but context clues through 2 weeks, they help. Again, this line.
I mean,
opened,
we know
go
more
ahead.
about Penn State. We know more about Penn State. I mean, to beat Wisconsin and Camp Randall is significant.
The line opened again at 7.5. As I said, some of the pro bettors jumped on Auburn. It's now down to 6.
Yep.
I went back and forth on this one a bunch of times, and I can explain why. But it feels almost impossible to judge because we just don't have enough context on Auburn. We do know more about Penn State.
Mm-hmm.
The most obvious example here is Bo Nix. So Bo Nix, who we've had an interesting relationship with on this show. I think I've been more pro Nix than you have.
Correct.
Throughout his 2 years as playing quarterback at Auburn. But Bo Nix has completed 75% of his passes, just about 75%, 74.4% of his passes, and has thrown 5 touchdowns to 0 interceptions so far. He's looked good.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the Bo Nix we've come to know over the last 2 years, is it?
No, not necessarily.
The Bo Nix that we know is one that has thrown 13 career interceptions, with 12 of them coming on the road or at a neutral site.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Bryan Harsin knows Bo. Maybe Bo knows Bo now. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But again, history needs to be something of a guide here for some of these early season matchups where we just don't have the context. So how much can you trust Bo Nix? I don't know. How much can you trust what we've seen from Auburn on the ground? 340 rushing yards per game is damn impressive.
Yeah.
And I think it's really wise of Bryan Harsin to take some of the pressure off Bo Nix to lean on a really talented backfield. I like what he's doing. It's just
Tank is amazing. Tank might be the best running back in the SEC. Yeah.
I love Tank Bigsby.
Mm-hmm.
It's just how much of that is repeatable against a much, much different defense in the form of Penn State on the road at night, whiteout game.
Sure.
You know the drill. Where do you stand on Auburn here?
I'm intrigued by Auburn. I'm intrigued by the system that they're running, which is certainly different than what Gus was doing on offense. I have a hard time believing all is fixed offensively, especially with what they lost at receiver. And I know they returned a lot along the offensive line, but it was a struggle, the offensive line at times. And Bo Nix was under a lot of pressure. So while Bo Nix knows what an environment like Penn State is like, given the games he's played, both in the SEC, played against Oregon in that season opener, I think it was in Dallas or Texas. I'm not a believer in all is fixed. And I think Penn State's defense is going to trouble Auburn's offense. Now, I think Auburn's offense has improved, and I think they are going to shoot themselves in the foot less. And on the flip side, Sean Clifford in a big game against a strong defensive coordinator, strong pieces on defense, especially in the middle, that worries me. We score how many touchdowns did he lead this team to in the first half against Wisconsin? Scoring drives, it was 0.
Yeah.
0 points in the first half against Wisconsin. So I don't think Auburn's defense is on that level of Wisconsin's defense, but I think they're fine. And so that concerns me with Penn State and covering this game. I'm going to give those points. I'm going to give those points because I think there are more pieces that I trust on both sides of the ball right now with Penn State. And as you mentioned, they're more battle tested. So the Penn State coaching staff knows what they do and don't have with their personnel. Whereas Auburn's, I think they need this game to find out. So I'm going to take the points. I have Penn State winning this game 31-23. The environment is going to be very difficult. You've been to a whiteout game. I've been to a whiteout game.
Yeah.
You can beat Penn State during one of these whiteout games. It's tough. It's
hard.
Absolutely tough.
Yeah.
And I'm not there just in terms of how seasoned this current Auburn program is under this coaching staff. So I'm going to give those points and say Penn State wins by, what do I have, 8 points? Is that what my math is? 31-23. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's really easy to call out that Penn State's going to try using its running game to set up some of the underneath stuff and then hopefully pop one over the top to Jahan Dotson.
Yeah.
Right, I think we know that part. Auburn was good at stopping big plays last year. And my expectation is, as you said, talented defense, good defensive coordinator.
Lost some literal big pieces, though, to the transfer portal.
Lost some big pieces to the transfer portal, for sure. But they're going to be on the lookout for that, too. They kind of know what the deal's going to be here. The danger zone, I think, for Auburn is actually in the intermediate passing game.
Okay.
That's part of the reason why they couldn't get off the field on third downs last year. And it is something that, if you're an Auburn fan, the trouble on third downs last year was something of kryptonite.
Yeah. Different staff, different coordinator, totally different. We all remember Kevin Steele and those defenses, and then his just bomb defense at Tennessee for 4 weeks in the offseason. Yeah, I mean, you got to give Auburn some sort of benefit of the doubt that there are new looks that they have. I mean, Auburn probably hasn't shown anything that they're going to show to Penn State against these two opponents.
No, and that's why it makes this really hard to judge. Right?
Yeah, totally.
We don't know if there have been those improvements yet, but that was one of the Achilles heels for Auburn's defense last year. And they also gave up a number of air yards per pass. You know, my favorite stat, 7.7 air yards per stat, which was 109th in the nation.
Yeah,
what that
I am worried about
me,
the Auburn secondary a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, what that tells me is that there were guys open a reasonable distance down the field. Yep. At least that opposing quarterbacks thought were open.
Yep.
So I think where I'm going with this is if Sean Clifford can be counted on to complete passes in the 10 to 15 yard range, I think they'll be open in this game.
Can he be, though?
We will find out.
You've watched a lot of Penn State football.
We will find out.
Okay.
I'm not convinced, but I think he can get enough of those to propel Penn State to victory here. I think it's close for most of the way. I think it swings on a turnover or two, maybe by Bo Nix. I think Penn State pulls way late. You said 31-23. I got 28-20.
Okay.
So we agree on the differential.
Yep. Hey, thanks for watching. Consider, if you haven't, subscribing to the channel and hitting that little bell to be alerted, and listening to the podcast at solidverbal.com.